Chapter 2. First Declension. Chapter 2 covers the following: the term declension, the three basic qualities of Latin nouns, that is, case, number, and gender, basic sentence structure, subject, verb, direct object, and so on, the 6 cases of Latin nouns and the uses of those cases, the formation of the different cases in Latin, and the way adjectives agree with nouns. At the end of this lesson, we'll review the vocabulary you should memorize in this chapter. Declension. As with conjugation, the term declension has 2 meanings in Latin. It means, first, the process of joining a case ending onto a noun base. Second, it is a term used to refer to one of the 5 categories of nouns distinguished by the sound ending the noun base: a, short o or short u, a consonant or short I, long U, long E. First, let's look at the 3 basic characteristics of every Latin noun: case, number, and gender. All Latin nouns and adjectives have these 3 grammatical qualities. First, case, how the noun functions in a sentence. That is it the subject, the direct object, the object of a preposition, or any of many other uses? Second, number, singular or plural, and third, gender, masculine, feminine, or neuter. Every noun in Latin will have 1 case, 1 number, and 1 gender, and only one of each of these qualities. In other words, a noun in a sentence cannot be both singular and plural, or masculine and feminine. Whenever asked, and I will ask, you should be able to give the correct answer for all 3 qualities. Number is so simple, there's no need to discuss that. It refers to a noun that is either singular, there's only one of them, or plural, there's more than one of them. And that, thank Jupiter, is as close as Latin will ever get to math. Gender, however, is more complicated in Latin than it is in English. Every Latin noun has a particular gender, but it's not predictable which gender any noun belongs to. So, gender must be memorized for each noun. Take heart, however, there are some patterns for predicting what gender a noun belongs to in Latin. Masculine things, man, boy, general, tend to be masculine in gender. Feminine things, woman, girl, mother, tend to be feminine. We will note any patterns, if they exist, to help you memorize the gender of particular nouns. And for the moment, it's not a problem, because all the nouns you encounter in Chapter 2 are feminine in gender. This applies to the adjectives you'll encounter as well. But in Chapter 3, we'll meet masculine gender nouns, and in Chapter 4, neuter. The sad truth is, you'll have to memorize the gender of every Latin noun you learn. Now let's look at some basic sentence structure as it applies to Latin grammar. And let's start with this useful but rather stupid-sounding example grammar sentence. The grandmother of my girlfriend gave her daughter a coin from her purse, Your Majesty. Grandmother is the subject of the sentence. Of my girlfriend shows possession. Gave is the verb. Her daughter, which could also be expressed as to her daughter, is the indirect object. A coin is the direct object. From her purse is a prepositional phrase consisting of from plus its object purse. And finally, Your Majesty is a direct address. In Latin, these functions are not represented as they are in English by where these words are placed in the sentence, but by the form they take, called their case. In the first instance, the subject will be nominative, so the word grandmother would be nominative if this were a Latin sentence. The next phrase, of my girlfriend, which shows possession, would be in the genitive case. We'll skip the verb gave, since we're looking at cases and verbs don't take cases. The next noun, her daughter or to her daughter, the indirect object, would be in the dative case if this were Latin. A coin, the direct object, would be in the accusative case. Purse, the object of a preposition, would be in the ablative case, and Your Majesty, the person being directly addressed, would be in the vocative case. Now let's look at each of these cases individually, first how they function, and then how they're formed in Latin. To begin with, the nominative case. Its primary function is to indicate which noun or nouns serves or serve as the subject of the sentence. The subject of the sentence is the noun or nouns which perform the action of the verb. A sentence can have more than one subject. For instance, Caesar and his army attacked Gaul. In that case, Caesar and the army are both the subject of the sentence. The nominative case is used for subjects primarily, but it has other uses, such as the predicate of the sentence. We'll look at predicates later. The genitive case. The primary function of the genitive case is to show possession. That is, that one noun is owned or in the possession of another noun. For instance, the man's house. The possessive man's would be in the genitive case in Latin. This can also be expressed as the house of the man. Note that English has two ways of expressing possession: of or s apostrophe or apostrophe s. Apostrophe s is used to express the singular possessive in English, as in the student's assignment. S apostrophe is used to express the plural possessive, as in the student's assignments. Though pronounced the same way, S apostrophe refers to more than one student. The dative case. The primary function of the dative case is to indicate which noun is, or nouns are, the indirect object of the sentence. That is, who or what benefits from the action of the verb. To have the dative case at all in a sentence requires a special type of verb, one whose meaning includes the possibility of benefit, such as buy, build, tell, lend, sell, show, give, as in, buy me a diamond, build me a castle, tell me you love me, lend me your fortune, and sell me the space to show you the love I can give you. English has two ways of indicating an indirect object. It can use the prepositions to or for, as in, I gave this to you, I did a favor for you, or a word can be put in a special place in the sentence, between the verb and the direct object, such as, I gave you this, I did you a favor. Note that English has more than one to. There is the dative to, I sold a house to you, and also the directional to, I went to your house. And of course, both these twos are different from the to, which is spelled with two O's and means also. And all three of these are different from the to that means an amount, 1 plus 1, and the to which indicates that a verb is in the infinitive form. Consider this sentence. I said to him to go to 2 other stores too. I think we can all agree that English has way more than too many twos. The accusative case. The primary function of the accusative case is to indicate which noun serves, or nouns serve, as the direct object of the sentence. The direct object receives the action of the verb. The accusative case is also used to indicate the object of certain prepositions, like ad or inter. We'll learn more about these prepositions later. Here are some examples of direct objects receiving the action of the verb. The boy drove the chariot. What did the boy drive? The chariot. Chariot receives the action of the verb drive and is the direct object of the sentence. The Roman army attacked Gaul. What did the Roman army attack? Gaul. Gaul receives the action of the verb attack. The Senate praised the general for his bravery. General is the direct object because it receives the action of praising. Duty calls us all to greater deeds. Us is the direct object of call because it receives its action. You should note that there can be 2 or more direct objects in a sentence, often when that sentence contains multiple verbs, such as, you will have no problem with English grammar if you studied Latin. There are two direct objects in this sentence. The first is problem, the object of you will have. The second is Latin, the direct object of study. The second verb in the sentence, the one inside the if clause. Why do people make mistakes and think that no one will notice them? There are again two direct objects in this sentence, each attached to one of its two verbs. Make, which has as its direct object mistakes, and notice, which has as its direct object them. Let us give the homeless better food and shelter. Here there are two direct objects, but only one verb. Give is that verb. Food and shelter are its two direct objects. Homeless is not the direct object, but the indirect object here, because it is not receiving the action, but the benefit of the giving. In Latin, it would be in the dative case. The ablative case. The primary function of the ablative case, at least for now, is to indicate which noun or nouns serve as the object of certain prepositions. By prepositions, we mean words like by, with, or from. But the use of the ablative in Latin is far more pervasive than that. It is in many ways the catch-all case. It can show means, the instrument with which something was done, manner, the way in which something was done, time, the time at which something was done, separation, that two things are apart from each other, all these and many other uses besides. Wheelock is right to call the ablative case adverbial, inasmuch as it usually specifies how something happens. For instance, with speed, or in good time, or by you. We'll spend several lessons later in the term learning different uses for the ablative. But until then, we'll use the ablative only to indicate the objects of certain prepositions. And finally, the vocative case, the only use of which is to show direct address. In other words, the noun that is being called or directly spoken to, such as Marcus, when I'm talking directly to my friend Marcus, or you there, or in prayers, O great Jupiter. In several respects, the vocative is the easiest case to learn in Latin. It has only one use, and its form is almost always identical to the nominative. And because nominatives and vocatives are almost always the same, rarely is the vocative listed in declensional systems, making it just one less thing you have to memorize. Hooray for the vocative! So let's review now the cases in Latin and how they function in the sentence. The nominative most often represents the subject, the doer of the verb action in a sentence, such as he in he goes. The genitive case shows possession. English does the same with the preposition of, or s apostrophe or apostrophe s, as in the army's equipment, meaning the equipment the army possesses, or the soldier's equipment, s apostrophe meaning it's plural, which could also be represented with the preposition of, as in the equipment of the soldiers. The dative case is used to indicate the indirect object of a sentence, and is best represented by the English prepositions to or for, as in he gives a gift to us, or special placement in the sentence between the verb and the direct object, he gives us a gift. The accusative most often represents the direct object, the receiver of the action of the verb. For example, she saved her husband. Husband is the direct object of the sentence because it is receiving the action of the verb saved. As we noted above, for our purposes right now, the ablative will serve as the object of certain prepositions, although it has many other uses in Latin, and we'll cover those later in the class. Right now, all you need to know is that the Latin ablative is best represented by the English prepositions by, with, and from. Finally, the vocative, the easiest of the cases in Latin, is used to show that a noun is being directly addressed. As in, "Oh, teacher, are those all the cases there are in Latin?" And the answer is, no, but it's all you need to know for now. One of the greatest challenges for English speakers in learning Latin is the difference between the way Latin represents grammar and the way English does. In English, to show that a word is functioning as the subject, for instance, we put it in a special place in the sentence. So, for example, we say, the boy loves the girl. We know that it is the boy loving the girl, not the girl loving the boy, because the boy precedes the verb and the girl follows it. Because of this word placement, it means that the boy is the subject of the sentence, the doer of the verb action, and the girl is the direct object, the receiver of the verb action. Reversing their placement in the sentence reverses the sense, the girl loves the boy. But in Latin, none of this is true. Word placement does not show grammar. The Romans instead used endings attached to the end of a noun to show the way it functioned in a sentence. That means they could put a noun anywhere in a sentence and still know that it functioned as the subject or direct object because the ending itself told them how the word was being used grammatically. In other words, you could take the word boy, put it in the nominative case, and because it was in that form, the Romans would know it was the subject of the sentence. That is, it was the boy who loved the girl, not the girl who loved the boy. It didn't matter where the word boy came in the sentence. That makes it absolutely essential to know how a noun declines and the uses of the various cases, because only by doing that can you figure out the basic grammar of any Latin sentence. Now let's look at one set of those declensional endings, the first declension. The first declension is a group of nouns which decline the same way, with endings that for the most part are based on the letter A. And just so you know, first declension is the first of 5 declensions. But you are responsible only for the first declension in this lesson. In first declension, the nominative singular is represented by a short letter A. The genitive singular is represented by the diphthong spelled A-E and pronounced I. The dative singular uses the same form. The accusative singular uses am. The ablative singular uses a long A, I'll talk about that in a second, and the vocative a short A. Those are the singular endings of the first declension. Now, back to the long A of the ablative. Do you remember what we said in the introduction to Chapter 1? That the Romans could hear the difference between a long vowel and a short vowel, not because they sounded different, but because a long vowel was held for a longer period of time. Therefore, the short A of the nominative and vocative singular, a, sounded different to the Romans from the long A of the ablative singular, ah. Returning to the case endings, we did the singular. Let's look at the plural. The nominative plural ending is I, the genitive plural arum, the dative plural is, the accusative plural as, the ablative plural is, and the vocative plural I, just like the nominative. Now let's review all the endings together, singular and plural, beginning with the nominative singular. A, I, ah. We'll leave the vocative off. I, arum, is, as, is. Let's say it again. A, I, ah. I, arum, is, as, is. Now, stop this presentation and practice saying these forms until you can say them correctly in under 5 seconds, and at least once try doing it backwards. Now let's learn how to form a full Latin noun by taking these endings and attaching them to the end of a noun base. The word I'm going to use is fama, which means reputation. Its base is fam. To this base, add the endings you just memorized, I, and so on, and you have a full Latin noun. The result is fama, famai, famam, fama, vocative fama. In the plural, famai, famarum, famis, famas, famis, and the vocative plural, famai. It is actually rather difficult to translate these words into English because the Latin words with their case endings contain grammatical information which English words do not readily include. All the same, it's necessary to translate these words so that the English fully represents what the Latin is saying. After all, when the Romans heard the word famam, they not only heard reputation, but that the word was accusative. meaning that it functioned as the direct object or one of the other uses of that case. Here's how to do it. Fama is translated as reputation with an S in parentheses after it to indicate that it most likely would function as the subject of the sentence. And here's another important difference between English and Latin. English has two articles, the and a. Latin has no article at all. Therefore, when translating into English, it will be necessary often to add the or a in order to produce good English sense. So the proper translation of fama is reputation, or a reputation, or the reputation. To remind you of this, I'm going to use the definite article the throughout this exercise, with S in parentheses after it, in order to indicate that it most likely would serve as the subject of the sentence. The genitive singular is translated as of the reputation, or the reputations apostrophe S, although I can't imagine anyone actually saying that. The dative is translated to or for the reputation. The accusative is translated as the reputation, with do in parentheses after it, to indicate that the word most likely functions as the direct object in the sentence. The ablative fama is best translated as by, with, or from the reputation, but in reality will most often serve as the object of a preposition. The vocative is translated as o reputation, saying which is a sign of certifiable insanity. The plural presents no problems whatsoever. Simply pluralize the singular translations. There's no need to go through these. Finally, let's look at adjectives, because nouns often have adjectives attached to them. Adjectives are a part of speech, and the function of adjectives is that they modify nouns. Modify is the term grammarians use when they mean an adjective delimits the meaning of a noun. That is, it indicates which particular noun out of a group is being referred to. We'll explore adjectives more later in the class, but for right now, let's just say this much. The real contribution of adjectives to language is that they allow us not to have an overwhelming number of nouns. That is, rather than have to have a separate word that means, for instance, red car, adjectives allow you to point out which car you mean, the red one, by attaching the adjective red to car. If we had to have separate words for red car, green car, blue car, our language would be a giant, boiling, overflowing sea of nouns that no one could sail. So let's just say a big thank you to whoever of our human ancestors invented the adjective. The central thing you need to know about Latin adjectives is that they agree with the nouns they go with in number, gender, and case. You'll hear me say that and make you say that many times in this class. So, if you think about it, that means that adjectives have to change their endings the same way that nouns change their endings if the adjective is to agree with the noun that it goes with. Therefore, just like nouns, adjectives decline. That is, they go through a declensional system identical to the system I just showed you for nouns. Here's a chart showing a Latin adjective declining in accordance with the noun it goes with. And please note that the adjective comes after the noun, which is typical of Latin, also of modern French, but very different from English, where we tend to put the adjective before the noun it goes with. In this case, I've attached the adjective mea, meaning my or belonging to me, to the noun fama, reputation, producing the noun-adjective cluster fama mea, meaning my reputation. In the form fama mea, the nominative singular, the word cluster can function as the subject of the sentence. But if you change fama to famai, making it genitive singular, you must also change mea to mei in order to make the adjective agree with the noun it goes with in number, gender, and case. This will be true for every case, both singular and plural. So let's say these two words, fama and mea, together as they go through their declension. Fama mea, famai mei, famai mei, famam meam, fama mea. I'm going to leave the vocative off as usual. And then in the plural, famai, meai, famarum, mearum, famis, meis, famas, meas, famis, meis. The translation of the noun with the adjective is no different from the translation we've already studied with the noun. In the nominative singular, fama mea is translated as my reputation with an S after to indicate that it's the subject. Please note that English normally doesn't use the when you have an adjective like my. So in this case, we don't add the article. The rest of the translations follow according to the way that nouns were translated. Of my reputation, to or for my reputation, and so on. To end this lesson, let's return to the sentence we started with at the beginning. The grandmother of my girlfriend gave her daughter a coin from her purse, Your Majesty, and review the Latin cases and how they're used. In this sentence, the subject is grandmother, of my girlfriend shows possession, gave is the verb, her daughter is the indirect object, a coin is the direct object, from her purse is a prepositional phrase in which purse operates as the object of the preposition from, and Your Majesty shows direct address. If this were a Latin sentence, the word grandmother as the subject would have a nominative ending, in this case, a short a. Of my girlfriend, which shows possession, would be in the genitive case, and would have an ae ending. Her daughter, the indirect object, would be in the dative case, and also have an ae ending. A coin, the direct object, would be in the accusative case, and have an am ending. Purse, as the object of the preposition from, would be in the ablative case, and have a long a ending. And Your Majesty, because it shows direct address, would be in the vocative case, and have a short a ending. If we make the nouns in this sentence plural, so that it reads, the grandmothers of my girlfriends gave to their daughters coins from their purses, Your Majesties, though the cases would not change, the endings would become plural, so that grandmothers would have an ae ending, of my girlfriends would have an arum ending, to their daughters, is, coins, as, purses, is, and Your Majesty's ae. Phew, we're done. That's the grammar for this lesson. Now let's look at the vocabulary. The first word is fama, fami, feminine, meaning report, rumor, or fame. It's a first declension feminine noun. The abbreviation 1 indicates that the word is first declension. The abbreviation F indicates that it's feminine in gender. To get the base of any first declension noun, go to the genitive singular, which must end I. Remember, it will be spelled in Latin ae. Drop the I, and you have the base of the word. In this case, the base for fama is fam, F-A-M. The next word is fortuna, fortunae, feminine, meaning fortune or luck, also a first declension noun. The abbreviation AE is used to indicate that a word is first declension and regular in its formation. So the base of fortuna is fortune. The next word, patria, patriae, feminine, means fatherland or native country. It's a first declension feminine noun. The next word is pecunia, pecuniae, feminine, meaning money, also a first declension feminine noun. The next word is puella, puellae, feminine, meaning girl, another first declension feminine noun. Vita, vitae, feminine, means life or mode of life, and is also first declension feminine. Forma, formae, feminine, means form or beauty or shape. It is a first declension feminine noun. Notice that the Romans thought that things that had visible form also had beauty, in the same way that we use shapely to mean pretty. The next word, ira, irae, feminine, means anger. It's a first declension feminine noun. We get words like irate from this. What would you guess irate means? If you don't know, go look it up in a dictionary. Philosophia, philosophiae, feminine, another first declension noun, means philosophy, and it's actually not originally a Latin word, but a word that later Romans borrowed from Greek. Apparently, the early Romans were too busy conquering the world to have much time for studying philosophy. Another thing to note here is that nouns with bases ending in I will in some cases produce double I's in their endings, in particular in the instance of first declension in the dative and ablative plural, so that the dative and ablative plural of a word like patria will be patriis, or of pecunia will be pecuniis, or of philosophia will be philosophiis. These double I sounds are not diphthongs, but two different syllables separated by a Y sound, iis, which is implied by the juxtaposition of the two I's. The final noun in this lesson is poena, poenae, feminine, meaning penalty or punishment. It's another first declension noun. Also in this vocabulary are several adjectives. You haven't yet learned how to decline adjectives fully, so this vocabulary list presents these adjectives in their feminine form only. Later we'll learn how to create the masculine and neuter forms. The first adjective is antiqua, antiquae, meaning ancient or old. The next one, magna, magnae, meaning great or large. Mea, meae, meaning my, mine, or belonging to me. Multa, multae, meaning in the singular much, in the plural many. And tua, tuae, meaning your or yours, that is, belonging to you. At the end of this vocabulary is a list of short words, which belong to categories we haven't yet fully explored. For the moment, just memorize these. We'll learn more about these words later. The first is the simple conjunction et, meaning and. O means O. By the way, you should know that in English, O without an H means you're addressing someone. O with an H expresses surprise. While Latin makes no distinction in the spelling of these interjections, you should learn to spell those properly in English. The next word, sine, is a preposition which takes the ablative case, so that if you want to say in Latin, without money, you say sine pecunia, long A, indicating that pecunia is ablative and the object of the preposition sine. And finally, est. Est is the Latin word for is. It's the third person singular of the verb to be. We'll learn the other forms later. Before signing off, let's practice a little bit with nouns and verbs to be certain you understand the grammatical principles introduced in this and the previous chapter. First, decline and translate the noun-adjective cluster vita antiqua in all its cases and numbers. Pause this presentation briefly while you do the exercise on a sheet of paper, and then return to the presentation to check your answers. If you need a hint or two, click to the next slide. So the base of vita is wheat, and the base of antiqua is antiqua. Add to those bases the declensional endings we studied before to produce the full declension of vita antiqua. On the next slide is the translation. Now let's review verbs. Conjugate and translate the present tense forms of voco in all persons and numbers, including also the imperative and infinitive forms. Just as you did with the noun exercise, pause the presentation, do the exercise on a sheet of paper, and then return to the presentation to check your answers. If necessary, there's a hint on the next slide. Voco is a first conjugation verb, so use the thematic vowel a and add the proper endings. Here is the conjugation of voco in the present tense. And here is the translation. Now let's practice a second conjugation verb. Conjugate and translate the present tense forms of video, including the imperative and infinitive forms. Pause this presentation briefly and write down your answers on a sheet of paper. On the next slide is a hint, if necessary. As a second conjugation verb, video uses the thematic vowel e, to which the proper endings are added. producing this conjugation and this translation. That's it. That's the end of this presentation of the grammar in Chapter 2. For the next class exercise, print out a copy of the worksheet for Chapter 2, please. Salvete discipuli.